Welcome to the 4G 5G as a Service session, presented by Rick Galatioto from the Mass Infrastructure Group at Cisco Systems.
Again, I'm Rick. I'm going to walk you through some things. I'm going to say during this presentation, I'd like to have as many questions as possible. I have been doing private LTE specifically in the mining space since like 2014 when we did our first engagements in Australia. So I am somewhat familiar with the area. I'm not going to say I'm a mining expert, but I have had the privilege of being on mine sites. And every time I see that big truck, I remind myself I saw one of the automated versions of it, and I have had a chance to ride in it. So it's quite an interesting thing. By the way, it is not the largest machine I've ever ridden in. During my NASA days, I've been on the crawlers, which is much bigger. So, okay, so get jumping right into it. We're going to walk through some stuff that I think is very important. So the first question I always like to answer for people is, what is 5G? Everybody hears 5G and, what does the G stand for and all those good things. The 5G is just the next generation of our technology and mobility, right? It's just the next group of standards. There's a 6G under discussion already. So it's an ongoing process as we augment the licensed wireless spectrum moving forward. There's a group called 3GPP that regulates all that. There's a lot of discussion in 3GPP to how to address the enterprise space, which is, again, where most of the mining companies sit. And there was a lot of emphasis in 5G to work on things for this particular space. So you're going to see some things that are there today and things that are coming along that are meant to manage things like just millions of devices, an example, deliver ultra low latency type things. So things that are being inherently needed in your space is what we were targeting. I also like to always remind people, because it's not obvious, 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, these were technologies that migrated, and effectively a 4G network could support a 2G call. That is not the case with 5G. 5G is a new technology, kind of ground up, the way it's implemented, the way the spectrum's used, the way the products are developed. So there's not a compatibility between the two. There is an ability to interoperate the two, and that's kind of why I put this second slide in here, because for people not familiar with 4G and 5G, it can get confusing. So hopefully this slide simplifies it for everybody. And so when I speak today and I say things like 5G NSA or SA or converged core, they mean something to you. So as I mentioned, 4G is its technology. It was the first IP-centric technology. So Cisco was actually the largest provider of 4G gateways in the world because Cisco's competency is IP. So no surprise there that we did very well in that space. That was the first time we put basically IP right off the base station. So it became a lot simpler deployment model. In moving forward, we're going to even simplify it more, start to containerize things and make it a little more microservice oriented to give some flexibility and stuff to the networks. But in the interim, you get phrases that kind of confuse people. So I want to introduce a couple concepts just so those of you that are dealing with 5G understand what they are. Those that already know, I apologize for wasting your time. But 5G NSA are non-standalone, really important phrase there. Non-standalone was a way to do interoperability with a 5G radio and an existing 4G network. In effect, we use the control plane out of the 4G network, and we use the data plane of a 5G network to get more bits per second. That's a simplistic way to look at it. And this is the most widely deployed 5G architecture today. I mean, big operators have billions of dollars invested in their core networks, so they weren't eager to change that until they changed out all their radios. So this gave them an ability to leverage their 4G networks, but introduce 5G capabilities with the radio. That is the most widely deployed. It's not the next one, 5G standalone. That is a true 5G network. In that case, you change the core network and change the radio. As I said, there's no compatibility between the two. So a 5G SA network cannot support a 4G call. That's why in that box, I've shown them as independent things. They're actually two different network connections with two different ways to run it. And then, of course, the ultimate goal that everybody's going to, and one would be most interesting to most of you, is the converged core, because that allows you to run 4G and 5G in the same network. And in that case, we're effectively bringing in 4G components into a 5G network to allow for that. And if you think of legacy devices and device infrastructures and stuff and ecosystems that are out there, this is obviously the one people need is to do that. So we've kind of introduced this last one. So when we talk today, think in terms of even when I say 5G, I really mean converged core is what we're really doing as we go forward into the enterprise space. But hopefully that clarifies some things you may have heard. And I also want to stress that if you have a 4G, 5G NSA network, it's going to be more or less a forklift to go to a 5G SA converged core. One's based on VMs, one's based on containers, just as a real example, the basic infrastructure. One is 5G SA is a bunch of microservices. One is core element services. So it's not a compatibility issue. So just be aware of that. If you want to go 5G SA or to the end game, you're going to go into a converged core environment as opposed to starting with existing stuff today. Just to be clear, all right? One of the reasons people want like 4G, 5G in the private space, and I said mining was one of the first adoption spaces, consistent, reliable coverage. And if you've been on, obviously you guys, a lot of mining folks, you've been on mine sites, they're big areas, hard to cover with access points. We are just a really good backhaul technology for that. Big high-powered radios you can stick up there and cover big areas. So most of the mining sites we're on today still use Wi-Fi down in the pits and stuff. So they didn't obviously they're compatible technologies, so we don't get rid of them. But that was one of the early things. You just get better coverage with a bigger radio or more capabilities there. Obviously, you can get rid of some meshes and things like that. Ultra low latency is the one that gets the most play. This tends to be more in manufacturing, although it can be applicable in mining as well. And that's basically so you can take the smarts off the device and put the smarts next to the device. And then you have to have really low, fast response times because now you're sending data, analytics and stuff to a device that's then sending data back. And so that lag time has to be really quick. We also get placement, the ability to be very precise and like down to 10 centimeters of placement on something. It comes along with that. That does require distributing the network and putting a lot of the stuff at the edge of the network, which I think in mining is probably the most likely scenario. It's been what we've always done today is put everything on the site anyways, but that is going to require that. It's while carriers may think that they can do certain things, you can't really service ultra low latency from a carrier unless the carrier puts an edge right near you. So fast handoffs, obviously this is very important for automated guided vehicles and stuff, how quickly you can hand off, how reliable those type of handoffs are. This is one of the things mobility does extremely well. There's a lot built into our protocols and network designs and stuff, all about handing off things. I mean, anybody that has a cell phone knows they can go just about anywhere in the world and get connectivity. We understand handoffs between networks, between towers very well, and we do it very well in mobility. The intended coverage, we're now starting to see that you can cover more areas, right? Obviously, CBRS is unique to the United States, but there's other countries doing something similar. CBRS stands for Citizen Band Radio Spectrum. It's basically a spectrum here in the United States that they've opened up for enterprise use. The same thing is true in other countries. Depending on where you are, different countries have different rules. But we are starting to see more and more countries throughout Europe, Australia, and others, Canada, that are starting to free up spectrum. We expect that to continue. Obviously, that is one of the other big differences between 4G and 5G, and you get into a Wi-Fi network that was discussed earlier, is we deal in licensed spectrum. So clean spectrum is a big advantage that we have. Basically, if you have a spectrum allocated to you for 4G or 5G, you pretty much have that spectrum to yourself. And there's no worry about the guy across the street, another enterprise walking into that space. They're not allowed to be there. And so you do have kind of clean spectrum. It does help in terms of coverage and stuff like that. And of course, because it's clean spectrum, we're also allowed to put a little more power into the spectrum than maybe you can in the Wi-Fi world. So these are some of the key things that enterprises see as an advantage. So what are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about Cisco's 4G or private 5G solution, 4G, 5G. What we see it comprised of, and these are the things that you would be putting down into your environment. Obviously, the devices, the endpoints, those are going to be IoT devices you have today. They might be handsets or tablets, or they might be IoT devices on vehicles. So basically, the devices, what they are today. They're no different than the Wi-Fi devices you use now. They may just be Wi-Fi or 5G enabled devices. Licensed spectrum is probably new to you. A lot of mines do not have this, although the advantage of mining is you're typically remote, and makes getting spectrum a little easier in most countries. So that is one advantage that you come across in the mining space, is you don't have the same problem with getting spectrum as maybe you do in a big city. But that licensed spectrum, it has to be acquired. There are different agencies in different countries allowing for that. But not all countries do it today, but most do. We have seen cases like in Latin America. We've gone into mines where initially it was problematic, and then eventually the carrier did allow, after some little regulatory nudges from the government, did allow the licensed spectrum to be used. We have seen cases where carriers will license spectrum directly to mines due to location. And mainly, they're not interfering with their macro environment, so they didn't mind. So there are ways to get spectrum, and that's obviously the first thing you have to think about when you start to go into the space. You can't just run these anywhere. And there are spectrums that are available that are what I would call not good spectrums, in the sense that having a spectrum without devices is not always useful. So when you're looking at spectrum, always think in terms of the devices that you need. A lot of mining companies want to use off-the-shelf type devices, especially tablets and things, which means you have to have spectrum that's in the band that those devices support. The radio itself is another aspect of what you need to bring. It's very much similar to an access point. It's just a little bit different version of something like that. But we'll bring the radios to the equation, and you have to have those radios on your premise, manage them, and whatnot. Access technologies. The access network's not necessarily unique for 4G, 5G network, but it's something that you should consider, intent-based routing type things, because if you're trying to get ultra low latency, you're trying to hold QoSs and stuff, your access network needs to be designed in such a way to support it. You don't have to put a special access network down, but you just need to make sure your existing access networks can support some of the things that you may be trying to implement. Obviously, running IP traffic is easy, but if you want to be more precise in what you do, that network has to support that. And then, of course, the core itself, which is where my team comes in, and what we provide is the core itself into the network. So all of this is what comprises when they talk about a private network. And much of this is under your ownership and control and stuff. That's the difference between doing it with a carrier versus yourself, is you gain control of these elements. Just looking at this again, I don't want to implement it, don't want to spend a lot of time on this particular slide, but I did want to at least have a slide available to you that talks about the things I just mentioned, which is specifically the X haul, the front haul, mid haul, back haul. This is something that I'm sure you probably have some of this on your sites already today, but understand that is just as much a component of a 5G network as how you haul the traffic around. Typically, sits in the public networks today. You will have to have something like it if you want to distribute your network, especially if you have a multi-mine setup or a large area. You may want to give some thought to that. I'm sure some of you guys have already dealt with that, but just be aware of that particular one. I also want to stress the one in the middle, which is Open RAN. Open RAN is emerging standardization for how to basically decompose the RAN so that you don't have to buy everything from a single vendor. There are parts of the radio, the antennas and stuff that are unique, right? I mean, those need to be set up for frequencies and stuff like that. But there's also electronics that sit along the way that are really basically software running on servers. And Open RAN allows you to decompose that so that you can distribute the networks better and aggregate the networks better. So you're going to see more of that coming forward. There are some Open RAN vendors here today. Some of our radio partners specialize in this area. And this also should help you open up the selection of radio vendors and things like that moving forward. It's a big push throughout the industry. And I said, the gambit goes all over the place. Obviously, we are not in the business of replacing everything that's out there today. I mean, we certainly could, but you'll hear a lot of people talk about that, how you can remove everything from Wi-Fi and Ethernet. That is not what we've seen today. It's not an industry trend in any way, shape, or form. We are just the next technology to help out in the industry.
Hey, Rick.
Yes.
Just a bit more granular on the Open RAN piece. I guess talk to me a bit about how the existing RAN players are relating to Open RAN. Like, is this something that's being adopted pretty much across the board? Because I'm guessing there's a lot of mining customers out there that have existing RANs that they're wondering, can we plug this in? Like, how does that work?
So, and when we talk about as a service, there's a but. So I'll go into that when I talk about as a service specifically. But Open RAN is supported by all of the major RAN carriers. I'm not going to say that they love it, because this is a prepackaged solution that they have full control over and full revenues over. But they all are signed on to supporting it and do deliver. We have deployments where this Open RAN is used in 4G today, not necessarily in 5G or 5G NSA, where they have already done it, so they will do it. This is something that's emerging. It should allow for specialization of the RAN So you can get antenna, different technologies. You can get more emerging, innovation in the RAN space, because now newcomers and stuff can start to build radios and stuff that specialize. I mean, right now, there's no one builds a mining specific radio that I'm aware of, but you can easily see in the future someone would, right? I mean, so that's what it really does. It separates the electronics, which runs the RAN, from the radios. Nokia, Ericsson example, some of the big RAN vendors, they support it. They do deploy it. Again, I'm not going to tell you it's their favorite thing to do, but they do. But I will also say this is fairly new. So this is something that will get better over time as well. So
I guess the other clarification is that just because we support it technically doesn't mean it's part of the service day one. Maybe that's something we should clarify too. I think the service, the way it was announced last week, doesn't necessarily include the option to tie into those RANs at this point, but just know that the technology does support it. Is that fair?
that is correct. And some of that is because our solution is an as a service solution that we're offering. And in that case, we need to control the elements end to end. So that because we're going to manage and do fault management, provisioning, stuff like that. So we can't have an unlimited ecosystem day one. Over time, it's certainly something we can do. But the vendors that we are using are Open RAN vendors. So they are going down that edge. We're not limiting ourselves day one. We're just
and it's fair to say, like, if you do have an existing RAN vendor and you're wondering about this integration piece, definitely reach out to us and let's have a conversation. Right? There are already mining customers we are having that conversation with. So yeah, definitely reach out.
Yeah, and we definitely have deployments today in 4G that were with other radios. So it's I said it is going to be one of those things we look at over time versus just day one. We have to make sure we have full control because we are truly offering a managed service here. So,
right.
Okay. So I'd also like to do this one, and this is the slide. It's a little bit of boastful, so my apologies for boasting a little bit, but it also tells people something that maybe you didn't know. And that is that there are 1.5 billion subscribers today in the world going over Cisco's packet core. That makes us the largest packet core vendor in the world. Now, you don't think of us, and when you think of 4G, 5G, just because we don't have the radio name recognition. But we are, without a doubt. As I said, the core itself, the network behind it, this is IP technology. And that's what Cisco does very well. So our core competencies line up very well with that part of the network, managing services, IoT services, those type of things. To that end, another thing that may not be obvious is obvious. I mean, I think everybody knows we're probably the largest, or we are the largest IP network share in the world. But the thing you may not know is that we're the mobile IP, we have the largest share in the world. Today, Cisco is one of the largest carriers, actually, if not the largest carrier in mobile IP for IoT. We have over 800 million SIM-based endpoints that we manage today. 180 million, I'm sorry, 180 million SIM-based. So today, we manage over 30,000 enterprise customers' IoT devices. So we are a very large managed service provider or carrier, if you'd like, in the IoT space today. The service we're going to talk about today, our 4G, 5G as a service, is leveraging that same mechanism and same platform as we move forward. So just like we do with Meraki, where we manage the end-to-end solution for our customers, we're going to be doing the exact same thing in 4G, 5G. We'll deliver a very similar solution that we do today for IoT devices. We'll just expand it to cover all devices, including us providing cores and stuff on your premises so that you can run your services, and Cisco will deliver that and manage that network for you. So that's kind of the thing. The other thing we mentioned the Open RAN. I always like to call this one out because I was involved in this. Gogo Air is one of those unique cases, and you always say, well, how does this apply to me? Well, anybody that's been on a plane, they've probably seen the name Gogo Air prop up. Gogo is a provider of aircraft communications, and they are building a 5G network here in the United States that's focused specifically on aircraft. And one of the RAN vendors that we deal with is building a custom UE for those devices. So they're basically a special device that goes on the airplane, and the antennas point up, and they cover terrestrial connectivity to aircraft. It's quite unique in what it does, but it just shows you that 5G allows for this uniqueness. Also, the vendors that we tend to work with are people that are willing to support these unique environments. So we're not looking at carrier type deployments here. We're looking at unique endpoints, unique devices, and unique environments coming out, which I think fits the markets you guys are into. You're not looking for something that we'd sell to a large carrier. You're looking for a solution that's focused on your industry. With that said, these are a lot of number ones. We are the first in the world to deploy. We have the world's largest and full true 5G standalone network with converged 4G core. It's been set up for a while. Like I said, there's a lot of 5G out there, but most of it's NSA at the networking side. So our core is proven, has been in service for quite some time in the largest network deployment in the world. So we're not pushing. We're using the exact same environment, same code, moving down into the enterprise space. So we're building out of a lot of known good things. What we're trying to deliver to the space in private IP is something that's easy to consume, that delivers on the service outcomes you're looking for. It's based on purchase subscription basis. It's something that we've learned in the industry is appreciated. That way that the upgrades that come down to software upgrades, software subscription maintenance, all the things that go with running a network fall to Cisco. So we do the work for you, and you don't have to worry about following release schedules and integrating devices and things like that. So we'll be working with this end-to-end solution with our partners, and our partners will be integrating an end-to-end solution and delivering it that way as a solution to you, so you won't have to be dealing with, if you don't know what 4G5 is and you don't know how a 4G5 network is configured, none of that will be your issue. Your issue will be the basic stuff, adding and subtracting users, setting up quality service agreements, deciding who gets what access. The things that you do well, you will do, and you will have control over. The things that we do well, building and maintaining these networks, we will do for you. So it's a kind of a win-win, I hope, for everybody. We will be leveraging our experience. I said 180 million devices connected today. We're building out of that exact same platform, so we know how to do this. Again, we've already dealt with over 30,000 enterprises today with this product, so we understand. So even though I'm in the mass infrastructure group, which, by the way, our control center team is part of, we fully understand the enterprise space. I'm not going to claim to be an expert on mining, but I certainly know a little bit about it. By the way, I will note, and just as we were remiss not to opening this session with a safety story, so I'll apologize for that. Guys, we're always supposed to do that.
That's a great point, Rick.
Sorry.
We need to fix that next time around.
Yeah, I just noticed it. It's like...
yeah, no, that's a great point.
But for what it's worth, I honked twice when I backed into the garage. So with that said, we are building out, as I said, an industry-leading core, but we're going to provide a complete solution to management, identity policy, the packet core, and the radio. We will not resell the radio. Our partners will be integrating the radio for us. We'll introduce you to those partners as we move forward. And so it'll be a complete solution to which there's one throat to choke. In this case, it will be Cisco. So from an architecture standpoint, I know this may be complicated, but I really want to stress one aspect of this drawing. 5G was set up as a cloud technology. So that's why we use microservices. That's why we do containers and stuff. And it can be cloud-based. However, in the enterprise space, we don't expect that you're going to want your bearer planes off your premises. So, and the key component of what we're providing here is the enterprise solution. We will subdivide the solution so the management and data networking devicing stuff will be in the cloud, but the bearer plane, the traffic, the dedicated radios, all that will be on-prem. So for those that had concern that your traffic may be, 2 counties away or a country away, that's not going to be the case. We will put equipment, servers on site to run this equipment, so your data traffic remains on site, except in cases where you want it to go elsewhere. But we will allow for that. We will provide redundancy on site. We'll provide the dedicated radios, the dedicated core, will all be under your control on your premise. There will be requirements, obviously, that you have to go. Our partners will do the civil engineering and stuff to install all this. If it needs powder, if it needs skids or something like that on the sites, all that will be taken care of by Cisco and its partners. So we'll deliver the full on-site view. They'll do the RF layouts. These things are not permanent, especially on mines, which sometimes change. So that'll be an ongoing correction point that you'll have to look at to tune those things. But generally speaking, that will be something that will be, again, under the as-a-service premise. We will manage the devices. We will provide the SIMs for the devices out of our network. We will do the authentication for the devices and stuff on our network. All the identity management will be provided. again, we can provide access identities and stuff like that in the network. But from your standpoint, this solution will be hosted and managed by Cisco. So you'll get a full solution to your premise. You'll get all the components you need, and you'll have a service that is continually upgraded. As we make improvements, as the standards change, as things are added, that will be added, and the service will be expanded accordingly. And again,
Rick, I want to maybe circle back a little bit to the previous slide. I thought maybe you were going to cover that in here, but the question I had was around identity and policy, right? This is obviously a big deal. And one of the questions I get from customers is who have actually gone down the road of private LTE or 5G, and they get to a point where they start realizing, listen, this is a whole separate identity and policy domain from what I already have in my enterprise. How are we doing that differently, or maybe talk a bit about that?
That's a great question, and I did hit it light because I actually had a slide on it later. But since you've introduced
it, okay, no, we can cover it later too. I just wanted to make sure we talk about that.
The thing I want to say at the very high level is the way we see identity at Cisco may be different than other people seeing identity. For us, that is the key, right? The key is the identity. The identity of the user is the same regardless of the network. So we want to be able to bring that identity across Wi-Fi and fixed connectivity versus wireless versus 5G. So expect that Cisco's process here is to make this as seamless as possible so that you can use the best available technology. I mean, we see Wi-Fi as an example and 5G as being complementary. And that means you may use both networks. In fact, you will be using both networks in every instance.
So is it fair to assume, like today, people manage their identities in Active Directory, or which is then maybe pulled into ICE for policy and that kind of thing? Are we going to be tying into those systems, or
you're going to be tying into
ICE?
Absolutely, we're going to be tying into ICE. So we will initially we'll add ICE, and ICE you'll initially establish your identity with ICE. Thereafter, we'll use Control Center to take care of the identity, but it will be
perfect.
ICE. Absolutely,
I think that's pretty key. I know you have a slide on it later, but I just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, no, that's a good ask, and I apologize for being a little light on that because I knew it was later, and I suspected people would have that question, because what we don't want to do is be building another network that doesn't leverage existing capability. I did listen obviously to the Wi-Fi session before me. These are complementary, guys. You're gonna have so much wireless bandwidth, you're gonna be using it all. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So we need to be able to be, and I'm not saying we're here today, but Cisco as a company, our strategy is to marry the two. Keep your identity. Open roaming is another area we're looking at, so you can do trusted identity across boundaries. We're going to be looking at Umbrella for security and stuff. Everything we do in these environments is not unique to the network itself. We'll be doing a lot of things we do in the enterprise and applying it to the 5G network. It'll just be one more network you're using.
That's really key, and quite frankly, that's why we're getting into conversations with customers that have already established themselves as having a really solid, LTE strategy, and they're actually opening back up the conversation to us because of that integration piece, right? It's pretty key.
Yeah, and I'm not saying everything's there today, but we have all the parts.
But directionally, that's where we're going.
Directionally, that's where we're going. We have all the parts to do it. It's just a matter of a lot of cases of coding and doing stuff. I mean, DNA Center was mentioned on the last example. That makes perfect sense. The DNA Center needs to be part of this equation because it's used so heavily in these environments. Certainly, we talk to the guys all the time. This is a directional. I always hate to use the word connectivity, but to a degree, that's what 5G is offering, is one more degree of connectivity. There are things that it does that is unique that I think helps. An example, just device scaling and handoffs and stuff are very nice.
Yeah.
Clean spectrum, things like that. But we should never forget the fact that enterprises use a plethora of different devices and networks, and we need to make sure we fit within that environment. I mean,
there was a question that came in. Maybe it's related to the slide you had up, the next one around is the core going to be Cisco or others like Ericsson? I think we know the answer to that, but maybe just
the core is Cisco. So Cisco will provide a core. The only component of the solution that Cisco does not control directly will be the radio, and we have partners for that. All right. It's just we don't make a radio, but we have picked partners that fit. As I mentioned, one of our partners is a company called Airspan, and they're building this unique UE. So we pick partners that understood the need not just to build radios, but the ability to deliver radios maybe for an environment, right? That was key. It doesn't mean that we have any animosity toward guys that build other radios. It just means that we were looking at environments that people could meet. I personally, because it's Open RAN, I've seen lots of unique stuff, and I know Steve Miley's on the call. He can talk to this. There's a lot of upstart work in the radio space, especially around enterprises. So I suspect this conversation in 24 months will be different than it is today about the RAN market as new players come in, customized devices. I mean, I've seen guys with 16 beams off of something, which is just unheard of. These are loud things, but people haven't built that technology. And as you open the RAN up and you allow for that innovation, I think you're going to see some of it coming about.
Can I add some little clarification there, or just ask for some? We don't have the radios for the core, but we do have the client radios that are available for connectivity to this system, correct?
Yes, actually, thank you for that correction.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sometimes I generalize. I apologize.
Yeah, and we're actually seeing huge success into existing LTE environments with customers in mining, even, right?
Yeah.
We don't have any content today on UEs per se, but we have a pretty strong UE lineup on the IoT business unit side. So definitely talk to us about that.
Yeah, as I said, we manage those devices you're talking about. We manage a lot of them, so we're very well used to that. And again, this is maybe the difference where Cisco comes at this. We come at this from a solution for the enterprise versus just one network technology. We just see this different. It's the whole ecosystem of devices, management of the devices, different network technologies. As I said, you can't get ultra low latency without building the core network that actually supplies that. So it is beyond just delivering one aspect of the solution. So clearly some of the things we're providing in this is going to be for you. I think the key is going to be the enterprise dashboard for the customers, the ability to go in and manage your different devices, manage your APIs, add and subtract users from the network. When you get new devices on the network, limit the domains to which, again, this is all about identity, but limit where a user can go, what they have access to, change that on a regular basis if you like. So you're not losing any control. You're just doing it through a management tool in Cisco's side of the network. As I said, we do this with IoT devices every day, so we're used to it. We're just expanding it to be across a bigger ecosystem. We have a compact core. It's not a large core. Just to give you an idea, we can support about 15 gigabits per second in a server. So it's not about the size of the core. It's about just having the compute to run it. Obviously, these networks, the code is able to do millions and millions of subscribers and hundreds of gigabits, but that's not what we're delivering here. We'll be delivering a smaller footprint that meets your need. We can make it larger by adding servers if we need to, but inevitably, I don't think it'll be there. So we'll have fully integrated. We'll have top route switches, things like that. So it'll be an integrated solution. You don't have to build anything else around it. It'll be full there. Again, we're introducing ICE, so ICE will be there for identity security, and we will always stay within the standards. Now, those that follow the standards, some of you may. There's things in release 15, 16, and now 17 coming out. So it's an ongoing process. That's, again, the advantage of a managed service. Cisco will be introducing these functionalities. We'll be taking care of code upgrades and stuff like that so that you don't have to worry about those things. From an assurance standpoint, obviously, we'll provide full 24/7 support. That includes the RAN itself. Some of the things you may not be used to having to do, SIM management, things like that will be done by Cisco as well as part of the solution. We'll be doing all the monitoring and alerting, failover redundancies all included. So the solution is going to basically break down into all the components you need to run a network reliably and make sure that's being taken care of. Hopefully that takes some of the burden off you and allows you to do what you do well, which is mining.
Hey, Rick, maybe I missed this while I was answering a question or something, but did you talk at all about the hybrid nature of this? Like, one of the questions that keeps coming up in mining is listen, we just can't deal with a cloud type service in a mine environment just because the connections just aren't reliable enough for us to deal with that. How does this service accommodate that, or why should they be thinking about it? I know that you had this picture up there, but I didn't necessarily hear that articulated.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the core itself. So anyway, again, if you don't know a lot about it, in the 5G network, the traffic essentially is encapsulated from the radio back to the converged core. It's unusable data. So that wherever the converged core resides is the first time that we terminate that and then give you IP traffic. So what we're doing to address this is that converged core is on the enterprise. It's on your premise. It doesn't have to be there if you don't want it there, but if you want it on the mine itself, that's where we're going to put it. And that's what we did in 4G, by the way. So we put it on the mine site. So effectively, you're terminating your traffic. You have IP traffic at that point. So even though they're being managed from a remote site, so the management of it and adding, subtracting subscribers type stuff, the day-to-day is done on your site. It doesn't, if the management system goes away, the device continues to operate. You can't add users, but you don't lose what you have. So it is autonomous. So this is, if you think of ultra low latency, to put it in maybe the way the carriers look at it, you're basically distributing the edge to the site. So
like, if I remember the operation of the core correctly, I mean, it even caches identities so that you can have people joining and leaving the service that are already in the system.
That's
right.
correct.
I mean, when you're talking adding users, you're not talking about someone turning on their phone that's already on site. You're talking about new people who've never been to site before.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. That's correct. Yeah, it's all there. So you're autonomous. And I know, because like I said, I've been on mine sites in Purdue where they're controlled in Perth. That's a long way away, right? So reality is you need to operate autonomously, and that allows for this network integration allows for that. So again, it's from the standpoint of once the network's down, it's basically on your premise. Again, it doesn't have to be that way, but the way we envision it is that way. I mean,
there was a bit of a spurt of questions here, so we might get derailed. But one of the other ones that I think we do want to talk about is how does this interoperate with a public environment? Like, how do people do people have to have two different sets of UEs for the public and this private environment, or how does that interaction work?
So yeah, that's a very good question. And today, effectively, it's a dual SIM arrangement. Because we're on different PLNIs, the SIMs are assigned to that particular network type. So you will only be on that private network versus if you went to, I mentioned Australia, I'll say Telstra. Telstra would have their own SIM for that case. There are ways to hand off between the network. I can't say it's been a priority for anyone today in the industry to do that yet, but certainly there's things in the standard that allow for that kind of handoff. The reason we do keep them separate, though, is for the reason you want a private network. You want to make sure that the access to that network is limited to only those people that you want on the network. So you don't want a public PLI, public address from, again, not picking on Telstra, but say you don't want Telstra doing that because then Telstra has access to your network. The whole point is to keep it unique to yourselves. So if you have an employee, as an example, that has a handset, and then maybe tomorrow the employee doesn't work for you, you can delete their information, their SIM information from the system. And even though the employee still has his connectivity to Telstra, he no longer has his connectivity to your network. So that's the way. And you can then control at your network level who has access to what. So as an example.
So fundamentally, if I understand what you're saying, fundamentally, this is a private network, right?
It's a private.
It would be the same thing as people coming off of a public environment and wanting to join your Wi-Fi, right? They're not going to roam onto your Wi-Fi unless it's a public Wi-Fi network, right? Then you do an open roaming type of thing. But if it's a private Wi-Fi network, it's two different identity systems, right?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things, I didn't mention it, but it is one of the neat things about 4G and 5G is that security aspect. If you're known to the network, it doesn't matter if your handset's on the frequency. We're not letting you on. And there's no way to spoof a SID or anything like that. I mean, the reality is you have to be known. The network has to, we call it the authentication server, you have to load that information. Anyone that's bought a phone in the store knows you register all that. All that information is registered in the SIM and registered with the network database. If the private network does not know your information, you're never getting on that network. And that gives you a level of security. You can't spoof that. I mean, so it does give you a large degree of security and large degree of control. And even more than that, it gives you the ability to control each user's access. So, example, in one of the manufacturing things we've done, the user was worried about the equipment of third-party guys that manage their equipment. So in your case, it would be like a Caterpillar or Komatsu in mining. If they wanted access to that device, you could create a path just for that person for the day or for some period of time, and then get them off your network. And you don't have to give them your Wi-Fi access and all that good stuff. You could literally create just a connection for a temporary period of time for that maintenance person, or a unique one for them for all time that's used for Caterpillar and their devices, but it's isolated to just Caterpillar. So that gives you some ability to be more granular in what you do in your network setups.
So that brings up another interesting question that actually came in the Q&A. By the way, there's tons of stuff in the Q&A. So once you're done talking, we're going to get you to dive into the Q&A. So be patient. If you've asked a question, it's not that we're ignoring you. We will get to it. It's just we're going to kind of work this out on the live session first. Segmentation, right? So obviously our core is capable of segmentation because we do this on, you said 1.5 billion devices or whatever, right? So public networks do this, right? The question is, from a service perspective, is this whole segmentation piece part of the service UI, so to speak?
I'm not sure I follow the exact question. So
if someone wanted to say build a separate slice or segment or whatever, depends on how they want to separate it, right? But doing a separation of, say, their autonomous vehicles from business usage or whatever.
absolutely, yes, you can segment the traffic. You can set up quality of service based. We go all the way to layer 7, so you can set up quality of service based on protocol type if you like. I mean,
Okay.
device type, protocol type. So we do that today in public networks, and it allows for full DPI. So an example to the use case, if you wanted to say, and this is where again we're not there, but this is kind of a vision. If you had a truck and that truck and 5 other things were on this frequency, and for some reason there was an incident with the truck and you needed to allocate more spectrum, you could do that through a QoS adjustment. You could even, over time, what we want to be able to do is then even be able to move the traffic that's now being starved a little bit for capacity, maybe back to a Wi-Fi network temporarily, maybe it's a little degraded, but to allow you to focus. So that's exactly the point. You can segment traffic, change the QoS in traffic. You can aggregate traffic on a certain thing. We do this in public networks today. We can do it in private networks where you could say the trucks shall get this much bandwidth and always get this much bandwidth.
Right. Okay.
And as soon as as it starts to limit, then other people they're going to get something else. And then you're going to assign policies. Today in 4G, 5G, we have policy controllers and stuff that do this. The goal, and someone mentioned my patents at the beginning. Well, one of my patents is on how to move policy across networks. And we want to be able to apply those same policies to every network so you could move between Wi-Fi and 5G, 4G as seamlessly as possible and maintain policies and identities. Again, we're not there today. I'm not going to promise we're delivering that, but it's where we're going.
So Rick, we could probably go on for a while and we'll talk about maybe how we can ask extra questions a little bit later. We do actually need to go to a break here soon. Can we wrap this up in like 3 or 4 minutes?
Yes, I can wrap it up. And I'm sorry, I get so...
No, it's all good. This is awesome stuff.
So I did already introduce the ICE concept. So I just want to reiterate that is part of the solution set. So we'll be delivering that. It's unique, nothing unique there. But I also wanted to go into some of the key things that we're doing. And the identity stuff that you mentioned, we didn't get to go into detail, but that's certainly a key thing. First, an identity needs to be common across network. We need to introduce enterprise policies, that segmentation that you were just talking about. We want to be able to do that. We wanted to be able to provide insights and analytics into how the network's operating. We'll manage and give that information to you. Roaming between the networks, these are where we're going. I'm not saying we're all there today, but that's where we're going. We want to leverage anything that's on the campus today. We want to give you the most secure network so you can see all the security devices and security things Cisco does today. We're going to bring in as part of the solution. So it is very doing it, and we think it's easier to consume as a service model. Having done private LTE for years now, obviously this is not the expertise of mining companies. Not saying they can't do it, but it hasn't proven to be the expertise. So we've learned that if we can do it as a consumption model, it simplifies things for you, plays to our core competencies. As I said, 180 million devices. So we run a very large network today. It would just be additional things. So we're leveraging what we do, as well as all the UEs and IoT devices we provide. So overall, I think we have a unique solution in the space. And we're coming at it what I think is a very unique perspective, because we see these as complementary environments and delivering services and data to you. We don't see this as one technology is better than the other. They have pros and cons, both of them, right? Ultimately, it's delivering the end mission critical use case you're trying to service. So
Awesome.
I'm sorry I didn't get through every slide, but I think hopefully enough there to interest people.
We thought this might be an issue,
Yeah.
but you know what? Thanks a lot, Rick, for joining us. And thank you for joining us. Join us for the next session by clicking on the next video, where we're going to talk about Cisco ultra-reliable wireless backhaul.